contribution of flexible packaging to circular economy. That is the topic of our next presentation, to be delivered by Mr. Guido Aufdemkamp, the Executive Director of FPE, Flexible Packaging Europe. Good morning, Mr. Aufdemkamp. Over to you.
Patrícia. Primeiro, muito obrigado pela oportunidade de demonstrar.
Good morning. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to share with you the contribution of flexible packaging to circular economy. And thank you to Mr. Alfredo Schmidt, the chairman, for organizing this Congress, and the colleagues. I speak a little bit of Portuguese, but I would rather do my presentation in English because I am more fluent in these words in English.
Let's start with a simple presentation of our organization. Flexible Packaging Europe is the major industry voice for flexible packaging in Europe. So all major companies are members. We represent more than 85% of all of the turnover. On top, we have even some further members, which are the beverage carton manufacturers like Tetra Pak, Combibloc, Elopak, etc. We basically do what associations do. We probably have much more focus on market information and market analysis, but we also have a very strong focus on sustainability and advocacy, but also we are very strong in food contact legislation, which is essential because I think everybody of us wants to have a safe product when eating and drinking. The membership list you can see, but this is kind of all our members in detail. Let's start with the regulatory environment. And this is just kind of a small overview and maybe also referring to each other. What we are talking about today, at least in Europe, but also abroad. Most of that came through public pressure, or at least through media pressure, which was then taken up by the politicians. Interesting enough, across all parties, fighting against packaging is common sense, and there is little rivalry among the parties in general there. I think the acceleration is partially good. On the other hand, we also see that some legislations were probably a bit rushed and might even lead to a negative environmental impact, although the intentions were good, but we're going to see that in a second. Let's have a look at some facts, some dates in Europe. So the latest data from the European Union are for 2018, actually, and those showed that almost 78 million tons of packaging were used. That is almost 10% above 2008, so 10 years ago or before. That is, interesting enough, almost 100% in line with the GDP growth over that time. What has changed significantly is the share of the different materials. Plastic packaging increased by 15%, paper packaging increased also by 15%, has meanwhile the major share of 41%. Metals, for example, dropped by 5%. What we can say, what is behind those numbers, is that the number of products packed increased significantly, way above those 10%. And this paper share increase, or the paper increase in absolute figures, can be explained with the tremendous growth of e-commerce, where all the boxes are shipped, etc. Overall, the packaging use per product, so per pack, decreased significantly. Focusing a bit more on the plastic packaging, here we see the overall recycling rates for the European member states individually, but also the overall targets. So overall, almost 42% of all plastic packaging was recycled in 2018, with, as you can see, great differences between the different countries. This is not significant, not basically or immediately because one country is better than the other. It also has to do with different calculation methods, unfortunately. So some countries are only taking rigid packaging into consideration and not all plastic packaging. But what you can see here, the targets, this one, so for the current targets of 22.5% are easily met, but there are future targets already set for 2025 with 50%, and then 5 years later, another increase by 5 percentage points to 55%. So more than half has to be recycled. Interesting enough also that member states can have higher targets on national level. For example, Germany and other countries have higher targets. And we are not talking about achieving those data rates on average, but every individual one has to achieve this. One of the challenges to achieve the new targets are, there is the abandonment of the material principle, the dominant material principle. I give you the example. What does it mean? Today, a laminated pouch, plastic, aluminum plastic, goes to the plastic fraction because it's a dominant material. In the future, everything what has a threshold above 5% in weight will have to be separated, or the materials will have to be separated and put according to each material fraction. So in our case, the pouch, the laminated pouch, will then be divided, at least for the calculation, into the plastic and aluminum fraction, and without being separated in reality. So that's probably more a theoretic case, but it will probably raise some difficulties in reality, in particular for all the calculation of the recycling rates. Another major challenge, which might make it more difficult, or which would definitely make it more difficult to reach the recycling rates, is the point of calculations. So today, the definition is everything what has been collected counts as recycling. But in reality, we all know it has to be sorted and separated. And that will be the future point of calculation. So the future point of calculation will be entering into the recycling process. And as there are between collection and separation sorting some issues and losses, that is natural, we mix all the packaging waste, we will have, just by this calculation change, 10 to 25 points less recycling rate, and the estimates for plastic packaging is that this will drop from 42 to 29%. So it's not achieving another 8% points, it's actually 21% points to reach the 50% recycling target. And this is all just calculation, nothing happening in reality, or no changes in reality. A major revision is going on with the Packaging Waste Directive, and that is the framework which all this legislation operates in. And we expect one general target, the overall reduction of packaging waste, with the mandate to enforce the reusability and recyclability, also reflect more the traditional waste hierarchy where recycling is superior of energy recovery, which, by the way, is politically not really accepted anymore for packaging waste. You know? So all packaging have to be either reusable or recyclable, and that will become a legal definition by until 2030. So there is no way to put any packaging on the market which is not reusable or recyclable. Interesting enough, even reusable packaging has to be recyclable after the final use. We are a bit worried about the definition of recyclability. Currently, that's 95% of the functional unit, but let's see how that goes. And we hope also that there will be no positive and negative lists, because that also hinders innovation for the recycling and waste management processes. There is the efficient use of packaging, which is prevention, and that is on the highest level of the waste hierarchy, addressed and recognized, but not yet any restrictive measure proposed. That might also be because it's quite difficult to do so. Yeah, what is our role now to support this overall? And therefore, we have a vision for flexible packaging in Europe. And the European flexible packaging industry fully supports the objective to transform Europe into a more circular and resource-efficient economy. And we are committed to enhancing the contribution of flexible packaging for that purpose. And there are basically 4 pillars, although you can only see 3 here. It's designing flexible packaging for full effectiveness and minimum environmental footprint. Zero tolerance of leakage and littering into the environment, circularity for flexible packaging, and speeding up progress with cooperation. I'm going to explain a bit more in detail what does it mean. Eco-designing flexible packaging means to achieve the essential functions of packaging with the lowest environmental impact. We cannot live without packaging, not in our modern world where we depend on the various packed products, etc. Also to supply hygiene, diet, etc. And so we want to have a lowest impact over the entire life cycle. We want to minimize food waste, of course, and we believe that scientific and the scientific approach of life cycle thinking and a holistic approach is very important for responsible decisions. We want flexible packaging never become waste. It should be a resource for the next cycle of whatever that is. And we encourage to optimize the recyclability by redesign and innovation, both in packaging design and reprocessing technologies. And for that, we initiated CFlex, which is a major campaign and project to really make flexible packaging circular. Littering flexible packaging is more than bad behavior, it's almost a crime and cannot be acceptable. And so we have a zero tolerance of leaking and littering flexible packaging into the environment. We want to have it prevented everywhere where we can. And as we cannot do it alone, we want to speed up everything with progress. And I'm going to explain a little bit more through the CFlex project in a while. So how can we then achieve this vision? So one of the greatest assets of flexible packaging is the reduction of resource use by being very efficient. And to recall everybody what flexible packaging is designed for, it is by definition basically minimizing the use of materials for the packaging of packaging materials. So it means a smart combination of either various polymers or polymers, paper and or aluminium. where the packaging designer takes the function of each material and then it's customized. It's very lightweight to transport. It's easy adjustable, and the weight of the packaging versus the product is very little. Yeah, so 5 to 10 times lower than alternatives, which when you can already see, I'm going to show that in a second as well. A can is obviously a lot more heavier than a pouch. And these theoretical assets, we had a closer look for the second time. This is now an updated study of what I've shown some years ago in Porto Alegre, actually. We looked this time not just in food packaging, but into fast-moving consumer goods. And basically, half of the fast-moving consumer goods, excluding beverages, are packed in rigid packaging, and the other half is in flexible packaging. Fortunately, flexible packaging only consumes 13% of the entire weight of materials. So, and then we ran two extreme scenarios. One is the focus on recycling, because it's rigid packaging is always good. It's mono-material, it's heavy, that is good for the recycling industry. Or we go into the prevention scenario where we use only flexible packaging, and that is relatively easy in food packaging. That's while it's not so easy in beverage packaging due to the CO2 and the carbon in it. That's why we excluded those. But here are the results. If you just take the weight approach, you can see that the reduction going from rigid or from the mix to all flexibles is a potential substitution of 21 million tons just for the European Union on an annual basis. So that is prevention at its best, really, to save 21 million tons. And for us, it was not enough to look just into the weight-based scenario. We also asked the leading institute, EFOI, which did the calculation for us, to also apply a life cycle assessment calculation. And here, you see the results. On the left side, you see the today's scenario with 67% recycling for the rigid packaging. Moving to the right, we substituted all to rigid packaging, applying the recycling rate of 67%. And in terms of carbon footprint, this would be 31% worse in CO2 equivalents than the current situation. So, moving to heavyweight packaging is not good for the environment. And then we said, okay, because there is this recycling focus, we applied a theoretic 100% recycling scenario. And still, because recycling is not free from any environmental impact, there is a 14% higher footprint of the rigid packaging with 100% recycling compared to the current situation. And if we have then the prevention scenario, so have it all in flexibles without recycling, the achievement would be to save 33%, or have a reduction of 33%, and reduce the carbon footprint by 26 million tons CO2 equivalents per year. So that is really significant, because it's more than 0.5% of all the European Union's emissions of everything. So just by changing from rigid to flexible packaging in theory. The latest life cycle analysis we did, and I'd like to share with you, is we looked into various packagings for pasta sauce. So the same amount of pasta sauce, either in a pouch, in a glass jar, or in a food can. And you can see the light green bars. So this is with the current recycling rates. And the glass jars is 75%, and the metal can, the tin can, is 87% recycling rate. so a lot higher than the pouch with 0% recycling. And the dark green bars are then the theoretic 100% recycling rates. The difference between for the glass jar and the metal can is because the base scenario is already quite high. We did not just look at the primary packaging, we looked even at the secondary and tertiary packaging, so that at the full packaging system. And going from 0 to 100%, this would make the flexible packaging 26% better in terms of carbon footprint. We have a similar scenario where we compared olive in a pouch, and here the results are very similar, a bit on the same different scale, because olives is less content, which means more packaging per content, and therefore the absolute numbers are a bit higher per 1,000 kilograms of food. But here we can see it's an optimization potential of 23%. So it's all good, showing that flexible packaging is so resource efficient. It should be used everywhere. Of course, I'm from the flexible packaging industry. That's why we promote this. But how can we really make, leverage the recycling potential to make flexible packaging more circular than it is today? There are actually two ways. One is we can optimize the packaging structure. For example, going from a multi-material where it's appropriate, going to a monomaterial, because that is then easier to recycle. But that has been an evolution all over the history of flexible packaging already, but that is probably a bit more accelerated. But we should also recognize and accept that there are situations where it's not possible. For example, it cannot be a solution to use more material from a mono perspective than a multi-material structure, and therefore we should be careful. Also, sometimes monostructures don't run as efficiently on existing filling equipment, etc., so that even the sustainability of the machinery where all this packaging is used becomes worse. There is a big other area which we can work on, and that is the infrastructure of recycling. And to improve this entire infrastructure, we believe, meanwhile, looking since several years into the issue, that it's not necessarily a technology issue. So there are various technologies out there, and we are supporting some of those even. It's rather putting the capacities in place and also, scaling everything up. That is really important. And in the European Union, there is now the Green Deal, 1 trillion euros worth of program overall, and that should be also used to support the investment into infrastructures, and also the recovery funds from the Corona pandemic. Unfortunately, or not unfortunately, the Corona pandemic was, of course, unfortunate, but it's now the recovery funds should be used to develop a more sustainable future for everything. So looking at the flexible packaging, how it supports circular economy beyond just recycling. So I just wanted to highlight that it's not just about recycling, but also looking a bit more holistic. In particular, when you look at the bottom, we support a design for circular economy rather than a design for recyclability. Recyclability or recycling business would prefer non-printed, thick, clean materials, but that is, in theory possible, but not really realistic. And so we ask for a holistic view to design packaging with a view to be fit into this for the circular economy. And as I already mentioned, therefore, we initiated CFlex, which is a cross-industry and entire value chain project supporting the making the recycling of flexible packaging reality, even by 2025, where more than 80% of flexible packaging all over Europe should be collected and brought into a recycling operations. The value chain is not just the material producers and converters, it's also the brand owners and fillers. And yeah, all the top brand owners worldwide are actively working within CFlex to make this vision realistic. And the only one is Coca-Cola, who has not joined. And this reason is very simple, because Coca-Cola, when you look at the portfolio of Coca-Cola, is not using a lot, even almost non-flexible packaging. So they are much more involved into other areas, but that is okay. Yeah. CFlex already published some guidelines and documents to demonstrate what can be done to design packaging for a circular economy, and also some recycling capabilities which can be looked at. Please have a look on the website cflex.eu, and that is easy to show. Having some conclusions, yeah, the European flexible packaging markets are in the middle of a major transformation, yeah, caused by the discussion of climate change and its subtopics, because we have to realize it's not about recycling or whatever, it's about climate change, which is the ultimate goal. The entire value chain is really looking into alternatives and solutions. Unfortunately, the closer you look into a solution or alternative, you realize that it's more complex than you anticipated. We are having a race a bit against the legislators, because we need some time to transform the entire industry. Such a big industry as flexible packaging industry cannot be transformed overnight. And yeah, other industries or other packaging application had 25 years to develop kind of decent recycling processes, and we are not asking for 25 years, but we are asking for some time, so at least 2025, and then we are good to go. And yeah, we are working actively on that, and hope and are very confident to yeah, make that a realistic scenario in the near future. Yeah, so muito obrigado pela sua atenção.
Nós que agradecemos, Guido.
Thank you, Guido Aufdemkamp, Executive Director of Flexible Packaging in Europe. We will now have some time for questions. So I'll start with a question from Marcia Perez. So Marcia says, excellent presentation. How can we reach a balance in the challenge to recycle packaging multi-materials to ensure the short lives of these products? Can you repeat your question in Portuguese again, please? First, she says, the presentation was excellent, Guido. And then, how can you reach all-forward balance and the challenge to recycle packaging that ensure shelf life of these products? Well, these days,
let me answer in English, please. The challenge today is, if I understood the question right, with the barrier and recycled content, is that recycled materials cannot be used in flexible packaging, mainly due to food contact legislation. And that is kind of the obstacle there, but we are promoting reuse or use it in valuable other applications which are not in food contact. The achievement of barrier functions in flexible packaging of a monomaterial, for example, are possible, but often they are much more costly. So I heard even up to 50%. And such solutions might also have a low operational efficiency. So I heard something 20 to 30% less speed on the filling lines, which is not really a solution and not a sustainable solution.
Guido.
Okay, Guido. Marcos de Campos Cavalcante de Albuquerque asks, how does the policy changes in China has accepted plastic recycling in Europe, which was sent in large amounts to this country, to China?
We welcome if countries with not sophisticated waste management system and infrastructure refuse to take waste from other countries, because that is cheating. And so China and meanwhile also other countries refuse to take packaging waste from other countries just to litter them or to landfill them is very good, because that increases the pressure to build up a decent national or regional waste management infrastructure. Talking about China, it's interesting to see that China is now transforming into or investing a lot into waste management. And I can imagine that in a couple of years' time, China will be one of the leaders, and not just in technology, but also in behavior. Because in China, it's possible to enforce sorting instructions more in a different way than in democracies.
Perfeito.
Perfect. If all flexible packaging in Europe should be recycled or reused until by 2030, where do biodegradable packaging types fit? This is by Augusto Silveira of Braskem.
Plastics is an interesting subject. There are two differences: bio-based plastics, which then behave like standard polymers or fuel-based polymers. And then the biodegradable plastics can be a solution for some niche markets for the time being. In most of the cases, biodegradable plastics are a disruptor for the recycling of regular polymers, and would require a separate collection scheme, which might be too cost and capital intensive to run.
Guido,
Paula Tavares asks, how does the CFlex initiative can be implemented in Brazil?
The value chain would like to cooperate and to challenge itself and to really work on creating a waste management system for flexible packaging, but that would probably require a waste management system for all packaging and not just flexible packaging. So it's not just CFlex in Brazil. It would probably be kind of a packaging value chain and not a flexible packaging value chain to set up a more sophisticated infrastructure for waste management.
Marina da Silva
asks, if you reduce materials in flexible packaging, you also reduce many chemical and mechanical properties of this packaging. What are the most recommended materials to make it easier for recycling to take place and also to keep these properties on?
I cannot single out materials specifically, with the exception of paper. And paper is, because of its fibers, the recycling always will have a lower level because fibers are becoming shorter. Other materials, even different polymers and aluminium, can be can be separated these days, and the technology is evolving and coming also to scale that even multi-material laminates can be separated into the various polymers. So it's not just plastics, but even the different polymers can be separated and then be reused for other applications, with the exception of food contact, which has kind of a legislation barrier.
Perfeito.
Perfect.
Bom, nós queremos agradecer.
Well, thank you so much, Guido, for participating in the 4th Brazilian Plastics Congress. We won't have time for further questions, but we will meet again at midday for our debate. Thank you.